And now we welcome into the show to further discuss the legacy of Nancy Reagan, Dr. Kiron Skinner, director of the Institute for Politics and Strategy at Carnegie Mellon University, and author of Reagan in His Own Hand. And of course, Craig Shirley, New York Times bestselling author of Last Act, The Final Years and Emerging Legacy of Ronald Reagan, and Ronald Reagan scholar and historian. Welcome to both of you. The funeral arrangements have been announced, panel, I almost said gentlemen, or ladies and gentlemen, and the body of Nancy Reagan will lay in repose at the library on Wednesday and Thursday for public viewing, and the funeral will be on Friday. It will be by invitation only, closed to the public, but it will be televised. Craig, does this surprise you at all, the arrangements?
No, it doesn't really. Is that she was 94 years old. She had an ever shrinking circle of friends and administration officials. So I'm confident it'll be a small, very dignified event because that's the way she would have wanted it.
And Doctor, I'm sorry, I was going to say televised so that the people can see. That's appropriate in your view?
Absolutely, because Nancy Reagan, in her own right, has over the decades become a national political figure, and she has, I think a growing body of supporters, and there's a reassessment of her role in the Reagan presidency and her role in the White House. There's now a greater appreciation for the substantive and policy side of Nancy, her work with foster grandparents, the anti-drug campaign, her speech at the United Nations on October 25th, 1988, where she, as First Lady, used her platform to talk about the drug problem in the U.S. and worldwide, and use that opportunity not to just blame the drug cartels in Latin America, but also to talk about legislators, mayors, judges, people on the street who weren't doing their job. So I think she, as we look back, she ends up being a formidable First Lady who was substantive, and then the work that she did in the post-presidency years, captured so well by Craig Shirley in the book Last Act, really show someone who the nation will want to watch, and indeed the world.
Craig, let me ask you about some of the, we were talking before we went on the air, all three of us, about some of the myths that are out there, particularly as it pertains to the Soviet Union, the first term, and Nancy's supposed influence on President Reagan regarding that.
Well, where do I start? The first off is that I've noticed that over the last couple hours is that this myth has been cropping up that she somehow had a hand in winning the Cold War, that she was much more liberal than he was on abortion and on homosexual marriage and other things like that. The fact is that she was pretty conservative. She wasn't as conservative probably as he was, but she was, she understood her role. She understood the role of First Lady. I would guesstimate that she saw her place as somewhere between Mamie Eisenhower and Mrs. Roosevelt. She was an activist, but she also brought tradition back to the White House, something that had fallen by the wayside during the Carter years. So she was an activist, as far as Just Say No and Vietnam POWs, as Kiron said, but also she understood her job was to be the First Lady and to help the president be the best president he could be.
I want to put up, Doctor, I want to put up part of the obituary from the Washington Post, which is disgraceful, written by, I believe, Lois Romano. Mrs. Reagan's most prominent initiative as First Lady was her Just Say No drug awareness campaign aimed at preventing and reducing recreational drug use among young people. But time after time, her efforts at developing a substantive role for herself were overshadowed by parallel revelations about her pricey clothes, rich friends, and about her meddling in her husband's official business. And there's much more to it, which is disgraceful. What's your take on that portion of her persona, or what some people believe about her?
It's incredibly, it's a sad commentary in the wake of Nancy Reagan's passing that a major news outlet would write such something of that nature. It's not only unfair, but it is wholly inaccurate. And, to comment negatively on her anti-drug campaign is to misunderstand the fact that no one has been able to curb the drug problem in the U.S. You're calling me in from Western Pennsylvania, Pittsburgh, where we are having a resurgence of heroin overdoses. There is a systemic problem, and Nancy Reagan got it right at the United Nations when she said we've got to look at our own country and what we're doing and not finger this drug cartel. She was ahead of her time in that way. But let me also speak to something else that awful obituary does not address. In the post-presidency years that Craig has written so eloquently about, Nancy Reagan went about not only for, taking care of her husband and being fully devoted to him in his Alzheimer's state, but she also simultaneously began the process of building the Reagan legacy in a positive way.
Right.
If you go out to the Reagan Library, it's a world-class presidential archive. It's a world-class museum. On top of that, it has become a national policy forum in which presidential candidates and authors like Craig and others go to give major addresses.
No, absolutely.
Nancy's imprint is all over
She
that.
was wonderful. Craig, final thought on Nancy Reagan.
Is that article doesn't surprise me. The Washington Post and the style section of the Washington Post have had it in, quite frankly, for the Reagans since the day they walked into Washington in January of 1981. The week that he died, the style section wrote awful things about the state of their marriage, about whether or not he proposed to another woman, about whether or not he was a good actor or a bad actor, that he was a lousy football player. The Washington Post is part of a liberal, a dominant liberal culture that always despised the Ronald Reagan, always despised the Reagans.
Doctor and Craig, thank you both very, very much. A pleasure to see you both. Thanks for weighing in.
Bet.
Thank you.